Hey guys, as you know, we recently toured Texas and got to see some amazing places, people and tanks. Roger was with us the whole time and we learned a lot both from him and about him. He's the head of Tunze USA, representing our products, our brand and our commitment to customers throughout the United States. At the end of our tour, we sat down with Roger for an interview and asked him some deep questions about his past, his work and why he loves this hobby so much. So stay tuned and enjoy. What's special about representing Tunze in the US? What sets us apart from the rest of the market here?
I think for me, when I first discovered the brand, it always had this air of mystique. It was very expensive from the old distributor. I thought everyone knows that if something's made in Germany, 90% of the time it's going to be a really good product. The details have been thought of. That's what I saw early on. And you had the first DC pumps that I know of on the market, the first propeller pumps. I saw a lot of innovation, and more than anything, I always remember that things were made in very small batches. When something was, sometimes we'd find just silly things like, well, we got one with a German cord, and they were always very apologetic when I'd call the factory and I would get the right cord, and it seemed human. It didn't seem like something that was just mass-produced and was just something stamped out of a factory. There was a very human feel to it. I like that. One of the things I like in other hobbies, like restoring cars, it's always something that gets talked about online. How many old cars you tear apart and you're restoring them and you find a guy's pay stub in there, and it shows you the human touch that somebody actually built this, and you kind of feel that a little bit of that person's soul is in what you're doing. And if you're doing it right, a bit of your soul goes into it too. To me, that's what Tunze is you've got this German quality, you've got this human touch. It's something different than what any other company in our industry does.
It's just a warehouse. But in your eyes, what's really behind Tunze USA?
When I started the company, I had a sunroom at the back of my old house. We converted that to be a storage room. It wasn't even air conditioned. It got terribly hot, and we outgrew that within a year or two. So then we bought a house that we used just as Tunze USA, and then that neighbors started getting upset about all the traffic as that grew. We couldn't take big truck deliveries and containers. So then we moved to our first warehouse. We were there for 15 years about. Austin kind of just went downhill like any big city has. I ran into all kinds of problems. I had thieves stashing stuff behind the warehouse. I had junkies shooting up behind the warehouse. I had people showering from my hose. So I just was like, I got to get out of here. We bought the land for the new warehouse. That was a whole ordeal. Like I would talk to realtors and people that were in this business. They were all trying to sell me a finished warehouse. And I was like, no, I want to build it. A metal building doesn't cost that much. Let me get exactly what I want, exactly what I need. Once I got into it, I realized that there's a lot of government hurdles, a lot of paperwork. It was a very taxing process. Nothing went on time. It was just a complete mental drain to do it. But I fought through it and I've got it. So there's a lot of me in there. I'll never forget that I'd sold the old warehouse. The guy agreed that if I needed to, I could stay another month or two. I could pay rent. When it came down to it and I needed another month or two, he's like, sorry, you're out of here. I had to move. The new warehouse wasn't finished. I talked to the contractor. He's like, I can get it secure, but we still don't have electricity, water. You've got no sewage, but we can get it to where you can safely store all your goods in here. So that's what we did. We were for, I think, 2 months working off a generator, sitting out in a warehouse. It was middle of summer. It was over 100 degrees in there. By the time 3 or 4 o'clock rolled around, you were just brain dead from the heat. You couldn't even think. But we made it through, and so basically it was kind of tested by fire, and it's my home. So it's our home.
You know the German company, you know the team. What does that connection mean to you personally?
I think I'd mentioned when we showed my tank how I started. You guys invited me to Interzoo. It was actually your father, and that was I want to say 2000. So I went over to Interzoo, was very impressed with the products, but at the time it was my first trip to Germany. I was fascinated by everything. I went around and saw a lot of different companies. But, the one thing that stuck out to me was how gracious your father was. Actually, I'd met him before. He'd come to do a show in the US, and I had just started because J.P. Burleson had quit carrying the products. He'd retired. He said, "I'm going to come out and see you." And that really shocked me. I was like, me with just an average fish store in Austin? I mean, yeah, I was proud of my store, but it wasn't the greatest store in the world by any means. That personal connection, and that when I visited, I mean, you guys really took care of me. I didn't have to worry about anything. I was fed, and I just really felt so grateful, that you guys saw something in me. I saw a lot in you, but it just meant a lot. And so it's more than anything, it's your family. I've always had an extreme loyalty to your family. I remember meeting your grandfather and just what an impressive person he was. I just remember so many Interzoos once I was part of the team that, well, we're supposed to show this at Interzoo, but it's not quite ready yet. And I was like, the show's in 4 days, and we're there just scrambling. And then we would eat dinner, and then we would, I'd pitch an idea to him, and then your dad would just take me into the factory, and we'd just start playing with pieces, putting stuff together and gluing things together and trying this and trying that. And it's like, yeah, this has a future. No, this doesn't. This will never work. I mean, there were so many things we tried and built over the years that it was like, okay, this was a completely stupid idea we wasted hours on. But, it was fun, and I like tinkering. I like figuring things out like that. And it's really been cool to see how the company's matured, because as the industry matures, like little things you tinker together, that just isn't going to fly anymore. People want really professional grade products. And seeing how Felix has taken it to that level of industrial design, and but it still has that feel because there's still people putting this stuff together. It's really great.
What's been your proudest moment here at Tunze USA? That one time you thought, this is why I do this?
You go back and forth. Anybody, I'm sure a lot of people watching this, they've done their time in retail, they've done their time in food service. They've seen it all. Like, the most rude, just terrible customer. Like, it sounds bad, but you're like, I hope something really bad happens next. but we've all been there. And, so you have those kind of people, but then you just meet some of just the sweetest people. There's been teachers I've helped that their whole class signs a card or a poster, and, you've seen them. I've got them up on my wall. Clubs are always a mixed bag. Some clubs, it's like, you send them all these products and everyone in the club, they're out buying, the cheapest Chinese thing they can find. It's like, well, that's really not worth my time. But when you meet people that they really get it and they really appreciate it, and some customers, I've talked to the same customer for 20 plus years, and that connection, and when you run into people at a show that you've talked to on the phone, but now it's the first time you're seeing them in person, that's a great thing. One thing that's hard for me is I tend to actually be a really introverted person. Like, all of this being on camera, a lot of times even just meeting people at shows is difficult for me. It's outside my comfort zone. I would rather just be out in the woods like this. I'm somebody who's very comfortable with myself and know who I am, and just don't see much need to interact with people. But when you meet somebody that they get it. They're really into nature. They're really good at what they do. They've got something that they're super smart about that you can gain something from. It's great. It can really be life-changing. You have a more optimistic view of the world when you meet those people. I've had customers that, just out of the blue, they'll send me a candle. They'll send me, I'm not really into candles, but it's the thought. It's that somebody thought enough of me for some repair I did for them, for something I did for them, that they sent me something, and it's really cool. I've got 2 African violets in the house that a customer knew I liked plants, sent me a couple of leaves. I grew them out, grew them into full plants, and I've had those things for probably nearly 20 years now. So those are really cool things.
You hunt, you grow plants, you care for an aquarium. What's your personal relationship with nature?
So all my life I've loved being outside. My wife would tell you that I could spend from sunup to sundown outside. Even when it's 100 degrees outside, I basically take short breaks, cool off, and I go back outside. You know, I respect civilization, and I'm fascinated by machines. I like mechanical things. I don't really like electronic things too much. The most interesting thing to me is this. It's kind of like why are we here? And how life just became all these diverse things, and how it happened, and how, like plants. A good friend of mine, he passed away recently, but Pat McNeil, we would sit there and talk about the climate and climate change and nature and humankind, and we'd have these big philosophical discussions. And one thing that he told me that really got me, he said, they really package it wrong when they talk about climate change and global warming and catastrophes. He said, that's really not it. Humankind will live no matter what. I mean, barring a dinosaur scale extinction event, we'll be in bunkers, we'll figure something out. But do you want to live in a beautiful world or an ugly world? And that's really what it comes down to. And I like to live in a beautiful world. I like doing something that growing out and protecting rare and endangered plants that are native to the area. I like going around and exterminating invasive plants, hunting. I'm not somebody that likes killing things. I take it very seriously, but deer in our area should be at a population of 1 per 50 acres roughly. And we're up around 5 of them, 1 per 2 or 3 acres. It's a ridiculous overpopulation. Then they devastate the plants. They die from various diseases, chronic wasting disease, starvation. It sounds bad because it sounds like we're in control, and we're really not. Nature can wipe us out in a minute. Being a steward is what I like, and I like learning about all the fascinating mechanisms nature's built. The chemistry in particular. Plants are just crazy. They build all kinds of poisons. Pat used to tell me, he says, when you look at a plant, you're looking at the world's greatest chemical factory. And there's plants that the genome is 10 times the size of the human genome. And all that is the data on how to produce all these chemicals and toxins to survive. And it's just amazing. And so that really intrigues me. And I think people really miss out when they, as my kids would say, they're like an iPad kid. They're just constantly glued to devices, and they're missing out on everything around them. There's just so much there, and if you get into it, it is just mind-blowing.
When you look at your aquarium, what exactly fascinates you about it?
I think for me, I really love those black-footed skunk clowns that I have. That's a fish I've always liked. I like the skunk clowns in general, but that's a particularly attractive coloration. And I think, that's something that is uniquely me. If everybody has it, I don't want it. So, having a fish that's a little more eccentric than the Ocellaris or the Percula, that suits me. The other thing, the anemone. I've always loved anemones. That anemone clownfish interaction, I just can't see having an aquarium without it. It's the same with the Blue Ridge coral. And that's the other part of it is again, the human element, that you get corals trading people in that. I've never really been into, well, I've got this rare or this named such and such. It's, well, I got this from my friend and it's kind of cool. It's like that leather I have. The thing's ugly as can be, that one that was like an off yellow leather. But the fact that it had the rappa snail in there, I found it before it killed the leather. I surgically removed it and the leather lived. Kind of makes it a keeper. I've had trees like that the thing's broken and fallen over and it'll never look like a nice tree, but it's like, well, it's been through so much, it's actually kind of cool now. It's just part of the family. So.
What gets you up in the morning and keeps you going with all of this?
I've got 2 kids and my wife. You get older and you kind of realize that your place in the world is fundamentally to bring in a new generation. That's your legacy. That's what you're leaving behind. Making sure that their world is a good place and that they're taken care of is very important to me. And one thing I always think of, one of my favorite scenes in a movie, I like non sequitur humor, so I like Monty Python, but on The Meaning of Life, there's the board meeting of the very big corporation. He says, well, we have two topics on today's agenda. First off, souls and how a soul's, he says, contrary to popular Judeo-Christian belief, people aren't born with a soul, but they bring one into being by a process of enlightenment and self-guided reflection. Most people never develop a soul because they're caught in the meaningless dawdle of daily existence. And then second off, people aren't wearing enough hats. And then everyone in the board meeting is just like, what's that about the hats? Is it a demand problem or a supply problem? Is it possibly better marketing and people wear more hats? More hats for what purpose? And totally proves the guy's point. That's the thing. You should go through life trying to build a soul. You should do something that matters and not get caught up on stupid things on social media and material things. It just becomes a rat race at that point, and you'll never win. Break out of the matrix, basically.
When you think about the future of Tunze USA, what do you wish for?
I think the future is exceptionally bright. You never really know what the future holds. Seeing teasers of what you guys are working on and just the things we've talked about on your trip here. All the ideas we've pitched around, I think it's really exciting. I think we've got things coming that nobody else has, but we've done that over the years. We had the osmolator, the wave box, the first propeller pump, the first conductivity meter, the first commercial protein skimmer with a Venturi motor. And so we've had a lot of firsts, and I think there's more firsts coming, and I'm happy to see that. We've still got it, and I think that we've got a really bright future ahead of us, and that's always exciting when people walk by and they're like, wow, how'd you do that? Wow, that's amazing. That's a big breakthrough, And so I think when those new things hit, it's really going to be amazing.